Last week has been quite interesting, as most of you know. I mean, we had the major drop move that we had in the euro, and we had some decent moves in most of the commodities, and particularly in the U.S. dollar. So we'll start, as we do every week, by looking at the indices. And if you look at the US dollar over here, it's not. If you look at the US dollar over here, as you know, and I pointed out for you last week, we have two structural points. One is the 80.43 and the other one is the 80.17. Now, what happened last week is that we traded above the 80.17 and we had the momentum push going above the 80.43, and then after those two moves we pulled back, and something quite interesting happened here. As you can see, we broke below one structure point, we sold off right to test the second one, which is the 80.17. Then we broke down and we made a low on Friday of 79.93, which should have led, if this was an actual break, an actual sell signal, this thing should have broken down and giving us a capitulation or a big move towards the 79.50 or further. But what happened is it turned back, came back above the 80.17 and closed at 80.24. So this means that we had a sell signal which has been cancelled now, and now we are triggered. We have a buy signal that has been triggered. Okay, and that is now, we can consider that strong, because this we have here the beginning of a trend change. Well, we do have a trend change, matter of fact, in the US dollar. This is right now, that is your major structure. We had a major break above this structure, then we came back, we retraced, we went, and this is now the new structural point, and the next close above the 80.43 will be the beginning of the momentum move, or the impulse wave, if you will, in the US dollar, and we should be looking at an explosive move to the upside. So anything that will trigger a trade in the index in the dollar above the 80.43, that will be the beginning of the next impulse wave to the upside. So we are going to consider the dollar as very strong and would be a major buy signal. The other one, which is the currency du jour, is the euro. And if you look at the euro here, this is pretty much a very negative picture for the euro. We broke below the structure, we traded in, putting a low of 130 based on the index of 129.45, and for the 2 days that was left after that, we have, it's a pause. It's not really, the euro did not move higher, and as you can see, those last 2 days, they are all, or the last 3 days, they are all inside days, and the last day, which is Friday, we actually have a big sell signal on that we have now a sell signal on the euro. So with the inherent weakness that we know fundamentally in the euro, and now we have a sell signal over here, so now the euro is a sell, and we'll be looking to short the euro dollar. Then we're going to look at the I'm waiting, I'm leaving the Australian and the Canadian for a second now, but now we're going to look at the British pound, and pretty much the same. The British pound right here, we do have another sell signal, and that's, we can technically this is 154.20. We can technically consider this as a minor structural point. It's, as you can see, this is your one failure to make, this is the second failure, and right now this here, the 154.20, so we should be looking for the pound to sell off and test the 154.20, and of course a break on the 154.20 should lead us very nicely to a move further down. And if we do break here, we should be going much lower than the 154 or the 153, what is it, the 153.35. We should break through this and take us to the next level. And all of this, what you see here, is the upside down of what we have seen in the dollar index. The dollar index now is set to begin its impulse move, and therefore these points coincide and confirm what we are seeing in the US dollar. If we look at the Japanese yen, this is in a big zone between the 129.85 and the 127.78. It is the strongest currency fundamentally out there. It is technically, it is strong, fundamentally it is strong, but yet it is contained in this move. It is in a price acceptance area. It is in a sideways move, so we shouldn't, I mean, it is not that we definitely don't have a buy signal. What we would have on it is a minor sell signal. The real sell signal will come on a break below the 127.78, so we will be kind of neutral to negative with regards to the yen. If you look at the Swiss franc, this is what we have here is a 2-day pause. We tested one structure point which did its job. We had a little bounce off of it, but that doesn't change the global picture for the Swiss franc, and we should be looking for a move to the downside. We don't have right here a sell signal as of yet, so the Swiss and the yen are kind of neutral to negative, so we can be looking at going long the dollar Swiss, going long the dollar yen, going long going long the British pound, the dollar pound. And with regards to now to the commodity currencies, if we look at the Australian dollar, the Australian dollar right now we have 1, 2, and this is the third is setting up now, and a break below the 98.71 should lead at least to a push to the next structure point, which is the 96.33. and then we should be looking for a major capitulation in the Aussie. Right there, again, a tool. This is similar to Janet will explain to you the why it is a sell signal, but it's the same situation over here. You do have basically two sell signals right there, and we should be looking further for the Aussie to come down. So the Aussie is a sell, the British pound is a sell, the euro is a sell. If you look at the Canadian, this too is now looks as a sell signal. We have this big push to the downside into the Canadian. We had the last 3 days are pretty much in an inside range. The range is an inside week, and then we have now another. This here actually we have 3 sell signals here. You got 1, 2, and this is the third. So you have 3 sell signals. We have closed below this low, so we should be looking for a further capitulation to the downside. So this is one of the weakest, technically weakest pairs. So the Canadian is kind of the weakest. The Canadian looks weaker than the Aussie. So we're going to put the dollar is the strong one, and then basically the yen and the Swiss are weak, not neutral to weak. The euro is extremely negative. We have a sell signal on the euro, and we also have a sell signal on the pound. So the first choice will be taking the euro dollar. We'll be taking the dollar long, and we're taking the euro dollar short if you want. We can look at taking the dollar yen and the dollar Swiss, and we should be looking at selling the Canadian, because the Canadian is technically the weakest chart, and we can also look at the Australian, which is not as weak as the CAD. So this will be basically, that's the sequence right there. So first we're going to go long, short the euro dollar, going long the dollar CAD, going short the Aussie dollar, going long the dollar yen, and going long the dollar Swiss. And okay, looking at the indices and the commodities, just to get a clear picture of what is going on. If you look at gold, this is a technically weak chart, and we should be looking for gold to continue its weakness. We don't really have any reason to change our mind on gold, And if you look at silver, again it's weak. I would like to see more weakness to the downside in silver, but again it's all those weaknesses that you see in commodities are supportive arguments that the dollar should be continuing to the upside. Last but not least, if we're going to look at the S&P, there isn't much there. It's La La Land, it's still weak. We're looking for a move to the downside. So there isn't much that we can find basically in the commodities really right now, except if you look at crude. This thing has really turned around and has capitulated, and now we have the crude in the beginning of a major decline. So therefore all the indices that we looked at and all the commodities we looked at again takes us back to the original or confirms the original argument. We're going to be going long the dollar and we are shorting all the other pairs, and in the same our first choice is selling the Canadian, and then we will be selling the Aussie and the Japanese yen and the Swiss franc and of course the euro. We can look at some of the other indices, some of the other currencies if we want. We can, I mean, some of the crosses we can take, for example, the Euro CAD, we can take the Euro Aussie, we can take the Pound CAD, because for example the pound is weak, but it is not as weak as the CAD. The CAD, as I said, has a major sell signal, so we can take the Pound CAD and the Pound Aussie because the signal in the pound is not as weak as the other ones. So this is the group that, so we're looking at buying the dollar across the board, and we're looking at maybe buying the Pound CAD and the Pound Aussie, and we might look also at some of the yen Swiss pairs. Okay, so that's the dollar. Let me save that recording and what it's